Right. In 1980, I started racing SCCA. And in 81, I got to go to the Nelson Ledges 24-hour race. And a guy, Russell Straight, was driving the pace car. And they're like, get the girl in the passenger car. We're going to scare her. So I didn't know. It takes a lot to scare me. I was brought up with guys at the track. So I got in the passenger seat, and it could have been any race series behind me. But I look behind me, and it's all GT1 cars. And I'm like, what? I'm doing that. So I got home and just totally stripped down my 85 Mustang GT, and I went GT1 racing. And I wasn't fast. I wasn't good, but I was out there, which is better than not. And I was in college. So like every college kid who races, basically you work to pay for tires. You're not out partying because every nickel went for racing. So when I met my husband in 86, he was doing show cars, and he's the number one restorer of early Mustangs and Shelbys. And I was going racing. So I was going mid-Ohio. He was going to some other show. So I said, we got to find a happy medium. And the happy medium was SVRA vintage racing. So I was his first instructor. He was best student I ever had. Fabulous. He's an engineer. He thinks differently. We work in tubing, so he thinks three-dimensionally, and which is really helps. Like if you're a pilot, you're also typically a good race car driver because you can think in at a different dimension. He started racing, and I said, well, I guess I'm not running SCCA anymore. I'm running SVRA, and we've been running vintage until 2000 when he beat the field by 16 seconds. And the people running the series at the time came up to us and said, find a new series. You're too fast. We all want a closer racing. We all cross the line, holding hands, singing Kumbaya. I love vintage racing. I love the people there. A lot of my students from my driving school are there, but the truth is, it's a great place to go. Wonderful people. But he's moved on to pro racing since then, and we've raced all over the world. So there is a rule in the log books for all racing series that you cannot race while pregnant. And it was never there until 1993. Why not? Well, there wasn't a lot of women racing. Now there's a lot more women racing. I started racing in 1980. And it was one of those things, like, hey, where's your boyfriend, your father, your brother? And I just kind of always did it myself because I had an engineering background and my dad was an engineer. So never thought anything about it. I'm one of those people that just do what needs to get done. Get the job done. So my husband and I had picked up a early Cobra, CSX 2051. It's a 51st car built. It was a Sebring car. It was sold as an independent competition car. It was one of the few cars that had Webers, and it's distinctive because it has a very long hood, where you usually saw a short hood scoop on a Cobra. This was the full length from the front to the back of the hood. It was one of those like prototype kind of testy cars. It didn't really do well. The guys that drove it were nobodies. They just had money, and they bought a Cobra. So remember, it's a Worman sector car with a 260 engine, and it blew up. So they didn't even finish the race. But we got the car through Peter Clute at Legendary Motor Car. My husband, he had been friends forever. And Peter's like, I got this estate. You want to go look at it? And the car needed everything. I mean, it was a beat up Cobra. And it was basically a street car that someone had raced. So my husband restored it, beautiful, to look like the winning car at Sebring in 63, black with the yellow stripes. So he was racing it, and I said, you know what? I was pregnant. My son was born in 1993, December 1993. And there's a reason I'm telling you all this. So this is Labor Day weekend at Lime Rock. There was a big vintage race. And at the time, ESPN had just started coming online with their second channel called The Deuce. Everyone kind of knew it as The Deuce. And ESPN showed up, and they thought this is cool vintage cars. There were people like Ralph Lauren there for the car show. So it was a really nice mix of cars. And we brought the Cobra out, and we brought a 65 Shelby to race, which my husband had restored both of them, and we raced them. So I said, I'm going to take the Cobra this weekend. He goes, great. Now, mind you, this is Labor Day weekend. That's September. My son was born in December. So to give you an idea, I was about 7 months pregnant. But I had gained weight from my first child. Her name is Shelby. And I raced pregnant with her, but no one ever said anything. But she was born in March, so it was kind of like you couldn't really tell. But I had an old driving suit when I used to be heavier, and I put on that suit. And other people in the Group 6 class knew that I was pregnant. They didn't like I was out there, and they were all guys. I was the only girl in the field. And they were like, we don't like you out there racing pregnant. Some were more concerned than others. And I said, well, you got a problem? I said, just pass me wide. And they're like, well, oh, okay. Like, you're not going to hit me. I'm driving a Cobra. You're driving something else of significant value. This is a vintage race. This is not NASCAR. This is not, Crash Fest. So I kind of calmed everyone down. Well, ESPN's around interviewing different drivers, interesting stories like any news crew would do. And they came over and started talking to me. And they said, hey, this is really interesting. There's a girl racing a Cobra. And I'm listening to them talking, kind of like, is this a good story? It's kind of different. And I said, well, I'm pregnant. What? What? All the flags went up. You're in the show. I'm like, I made it. I think that's what you have to do in this business. If you want coverage, you have to be there and have a good story and a personality to make it happen. So I said, yeah, I'm in. So they came and did a whole expose on the car and its history. And now this is 1993, so it's not like this is easily found on the internet, although they're now starting to put that on. And everyone kind of knew about it. So the race goes, and they interviewed me after qualifying. I qualified like mid-pack. It wasn't that great a car, because remember, driving a Cobra is like driving a pop can with a large motor and a spaghetti string for a steering wheel. So you got this big, gigantic, skinny little steering wheel and a car that, compared to today's cars, is terrible. It was a worm and sector car too, so it was before the rack and pinion. So this is a really not cheesy car to drive. And it had a 289 in it, although it originally had a 260 car. And the car, by the way, lives today in England. We had to sell it. The car was kind of neat, no problem, drove it, had a roll cage, everything was good. And I went out for the race. Green flag drops. I'm doing okay, making my way through the field. And coming down the front straight at Lime Rock, the car dies. So I got to run off the end, which looks like an old drag strip area, and I parked the car. Of course, all the camera crews come running over. What's the story? What's the story? I said, the fuel pump died. It's it happens with old cars. And they were like, well, how did you know? I said, well, the car was bucking and kicking. And they go, you sure it wasn't the baby? So that was the part that actually aired. So I didn't think anything of it. I go back to the trailer, get the car hauled in on the hook. We're loading up the car into the trailer. And then everyone from the racing series shows up. You can't race while pregnant. I said, really? Now remember, this is back in the day before the internet was what it was. So I pull out the general competition rule book, which is like the Bible. And I said, they call them GCRs. And I said, where does it say in here you can't race while pregnant? And they're like, oh, it's going to say on Tuesday morning, because it's Labor Day weekend. Tuesday morning, it's going to be in the rule book. I go, okay, fine. So that meant I couldn't race the next weekend at Watkins Glen for the Vintage Fall Festival, which I wanted, but so be it. So now we fast forward. My husband's running in the Trans Am series. He's running with Tony Ave and Ave Riley chassis. He's their factory driver. He's doing all this testing. And I've known Tony Ave for a long time. He'll race anything from a lawnmower to a lawn chair. He doesn't care, but he's run everything. And he's telling me about how proud he is. He's been on the competition board for the SCCA forever. I go, forever? How long is forever? He goes, well, since the 90s. I said, were you on the competition board in the 90s? He says, yeah. I go like 93? He goes, yeah. I go, wasn't there some girl who was racing while pregnant? He goes, oh my gosh, it was this big emergency meeting we had to have the next day. It was on a Tuesday after Labor Day. He goes, I remember that. He goes, it was unreal. There's new rules in the rule book. You can't race while pregnant. I go, is that like when your EPT stick says you're pregnant, when you think you're pregnant, when the doctor says you're pregnant? He goes, no, even if you think you're pregnant, you're not allowed in the car. You cannot race on the track. I said, wow. So who was that driver? He goes, I have no idea. I said, I do. It was me. I swear I could have knocked him over with a feather. So the best part is my son, who is now in his late 20s, raced go-karts when he was 6 years old. He's named after my husband, Paul Fix III. Paulie raced go-karts till he was 13, still car junkie through and through, loves cars, loves your channel. It's so funny, he loves to tell the story because he started racing before he was born. Not too many people can say that.
Premier Financial Services makes it easier and more affordable than you could possibly imagine to own your dream car. Their Simple Lease is one of the most powerful tools in the world of exotic car financing. You get all the benefits like the tax savings and the low payments of a lease with all the additional benefits that you normally find in a traditional finance arrangement. You can build up equity, you can pay it off early, you can trade in and out of cars because you get a very clear and easy to understand amortization table to understand what your payoff will be any month throughout your term. And all the while, the amazing team from Premier Financial Services will be right there to help you along the way. They've been supporters of the VinWiki channel now for 5 years in a row, so we can't thank them enough for that, but mostly we're thankful for the fact that they can help you make it easier than ever to own your dream car. Check them out now.